Well, hello, I'm Janet Morano, the Executive Director of Priests for Life. I also co founded the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, which is the largest mobilization of women, men, family members hurt from abortion, came back and found healing, and now they speak publicly to change hearts and minds and to give others the invitation to come to healing. Today's show is going to be a great one, a conversation. You have a question. I really want to hear from you on this show. We are here to answer your questions. And like I just alluded to, there are many, many people that are out there still hurting from their abortion experience. And why? Because the abortion industry says, have an abortion today, go back to school or work tomorrow. No big deal. But those of us who have ministered people who've had abortion know it is a huge deal. And they want to lock you down into this shame and quiet you. But we're here to show you that there's no such thing as the unforgivable sin. And we're going to answer lots of questions and give you a lot of practical advice today. Well, joining me is a very, very dear friend of mine and Father Pavone's. It's Dr. Theresa Burke. She is the founder of Rachel's Vineyard, which is not just the nationwide, but the most worldwide largest ministry for healing after abortion. Theresa, of course, has her PhD, and she's going to tell us, we're going to find out behind the scenes, how did Rachel's Vineyard get started? What inspired Dr. Theresa Burke to realize the damage that was done to women from an abortion? So welcome to the program, Dr. Theresa Burke.
Thank you so much for having me on today. It's great to see you.
Oh, great to see you, Theresa. And of course, I want to say once again, for all our viewers, they know, congratulations. Theresa now has another grandchild, James. And so she's racking up all the grandchildren. I think she's trying to compete with me. Okay, so I have 4 now, Theresa. How many do you have?
4. We're tied, Janet.
Oh, we're tie score. Uh-oh. Who's going ahead? I don't know. But aren't they wonderful? I call them grand treasures, aren't they?
They are so fun. And just seeing their faces make you smile so much.
Absolutely. So now, some people do know the story, how Rachel's Vineyard got started, but many don't. Why don't you give everyone a snapshot of, you were studying for, I believe, your PhD or in some sort of the final part of it anyway. Tell everyone what led to you discover that there was a need to help women who've had abortions.
Well, actually, I think I could start with a ProLife story, which is that my mom and dad were friends with Father. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm cramping on his name. He used to go around. He was like one of the first pro-life priests to go around. And he would have a slideshow, and he would come by our house and leave books and literature and all this stuff. And I ran a youth group at the time, so I took all of this material to the youth group, and one of the items in that was the silent scream. So I showed it to my youth group, and they were very moved by it, and they all felt like we didn't know this is what this was. So it really motivated me in a pro-life direction after watching that. It was Father Paul Mark, sorry. And so after that little phase went by, I did find myself in graduate school. I was actually in my master's degree program, and one of my first internships was to lead a support group for women who suffered from eating disorders. So they were anorexics and bulimics in the support group. And one of the days of this meeting, a girl came in and she had received messages on her answering machine from her ex-husband where he was referring to her as a murderer. This is before cell phones, so this would get put on an answering machine that the whole family could hear, including her 3 children. She was devastated. Her husband knew the emotional triggers that could drive her to despair, and he used them frequently to mentally abuse her and emotionally abuse her because it was such a painful thing for her. So she came to our support group after she got the message the night before. She had slit her wrists and was put on a hold because she ended up in the ER. And she was sharing what had just happened, and her arms were all bandaged. So one of the other women said, "Your husband's a horrible man. I had an abortion too, and it would just kill me if somebody kept reminding me." And then there was another woman who got up and started cursing and swearing, and she said, "We have a right to control our bodies." And she cursed out anybody who should try to make her feel guilty about abortion. She said, "Having an abortion is the best thing I ever did, and to hell with anybody who would make me feel bad about abortion." Then there was another lady who got up and she left the room, slammed the door, and we could actually hear her car screeching out of the parking lot. And I called her later that night because I was worried about her. She left so abruptly. And I said, "Are you okay? You seemed upset." Big revelation there, right? As my first support group, I could see that she was distressed, but that's about all I knew how to do, is acknowledge that. And she said, "I wish we could focus on eating disorders and stop talking about abortion." And when you're a student, you have to go to your supervisor. My supervisor was a psychiatrist. And I told him what had happened in the group. And he leaned into me and he shook his finger and he said, "You have no business prying into people's abortions." He said, "Abortion is a private, personal thing, and I was instructed not to bring it up." And I said, "But I didn't bring it up. Debbie brought it up. She's having nightmares. She's having flashbacks. I think she has post-traumatic stress disorder." He dismissed that and said that's a psychotic reaction caused by her medication. And I just couldn't believe what I was hearing, because in the field of eating disorders, they used to say that it was the talking cure. And so no subject was off limits, because people have anger, and it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you in a lot of cases. And the eating disorder is just a way that they recircuit the feelings and find something to take control over, their weight or what comes in or what comes out. So it was a distressing time to have my supervisor tell me I can't speak about this when I'm not the one that wanted to speak about it, but I saw that it was like a bomb going off in our group, because what we saw was actually all the stages of trauma, the fight or flight. The woman that started screaming and yelling and fighting to defend abortion rights actually extinguished any meaningful discussion that we would have had about women's feelings. Debbie was someone in active symptoms of post-abortion trauma. She was having flashbacks. She was acting out. She needed our support and our care. And the one that left, that's the flee mode of trauma. You have freeze or flee. Freeze are the ones who just sit real quiet and think everyone's looking at them and they don't want to say a word. And these are all what we know to be expressions of the survivor mode of trauma. So people go into these ways of coping so they don't have to feel. And because of that, they don't heal. And that can go on for a very long time. So after I left that group, I started one of the first therapeutic support groups for healing after abortion. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that women needed help. My groups were free. They were, we put out the word in some churches and some other things. And, people came. Each group was full. And I started just the Rachel's Vineyard model from that. And I saw very quickly that just talking about the abortion did not heal it. In fact, for some people, it made their symptoms worse. And we know why now, but I didn't then, is that, even to be exposed to a story or hear someone else say your story, because of the trauma, that people become so aroused and they go into fight, flight, fear, freeze, which is exactly what I saw in my group. So I knew that I had to integrate a different kind of a model. And I came up with something that integrated psychological and spiritual and many rituals to facilitate grieving, because for some experiences of trauma, especially abortion, sometimes, Janet, there's simply no words. You cannot find the words without being so aroused that you either shut down. Many people would dissociate. They just couldn't go there, or they would become so overwhelmed with feeling that they would have panic attacks, that they would, not be able to tolerate what's happening, have to run away. So this program was very, very special in that it helped to calm and soothe people. We had meditations, we had scriptures, we stimulated many different parts of the brain. And it's what we call a sensory-based treatment, because we were constantly touching, feeling, pouring water, candles, music, everything to keep you very calm as you confront the horror and the traumatic memories of that experience, which enables you to go through them, because you don't get so aroused that you shut down or go into a full panic, through the meditations where you could stand back from what was happening and look at scripture stories where Jesus was encountering people with great trauma, with great woundedness, and he was healing them. So the whole nature of it is very different than going to a therapist with a fluorescent light over top of you and telling them, tell me what your feelings are, or whatever, is a totally different thing. And it's probably very unique because it actually came out of my background in theater. And years later, we know that we know why in the neuroscience, of how your frontal cortex shuts down. That's what allows us to integrate our emotional, our cognitive experience. So just one side's in control, the one that's going to feel frightened. And when you feel scared or fight or flight is pushed off, the amygdala actually shuts down. And that goes the amygdala lights up and signals danger, and the Broca's area shuts down. That's our speech center. This is why talk therapy isn't always effective for people with trauma, because like I said, there's no words, or their Broca's area actually goes offline, and you can see that in brain scans with people with trauma. So we know a whole lot more than we did 35 years ago when I was piloting all this. And I'm able to explain why it works. But the bigger reason that it works is that people aren't coming to me as a therapist or the other people helping it. We place them before the divine physician who is there to heal our wounds and bind the broken heart. And one of the first Beatitudes is blessed are those that those that are poor in spirit, and theirs is the kingdom of God. So these that have suffered the loss of a child, not only are they grieving, but they're also poor in spirit, and the Lord calls them blessed. And on our retreats, we just see miracles. In fact, I just finished a retreat late last night. I was on one this past weekend, and goodness, what a glorious display of the Lord's mercy and compassion. And I could say that it's an extreme makeover because people left the retreat who had lines in their faces and looked at least 10 to 20 years older than they are, just in the grief that they've carried. And something that we've noted recently is that because of COVID, I guess, and people not having all the distractions, and for a lot of people that distraction was work, because a lot of people went through long periods of their work being shut down and not having all the activities, the restaurants, the movies, all the things they do to distract themselves, and doing some soul searching and reckoning. So this particular retreat that I just finished, most people were in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and that's not the normal retreat. And all of them said they hadn't spoken ever, even in their marriages, and many had many marriages. Many had suffered years and years of alcoholism, addiction, abusive relationships, all the aftermath of abortion, and never told anyone their story. So almost like it happened yesterday, here they are 47 years. All of them knew exactly how many years, and they repeated it again and again. It's been, 37 years. It's been 29 years. It's been all decades of time that they had, and a lot of them had never even given themselves permission to not only grieve, but to even to see that child as a human being. And it's true that the truth sets you free, because until you can sort of name it and give yourself permission to grieve it, all of that trauma stays stuck, and so does the shame and the guilt that everyone described, and the self-sabotaging behaviors that we just heard a litany of. And I remember when I saw the list of everybody coming, I was saying how sad that they couldn't have come when they were younger, because all this spiraling out that happens in the self-punishing and the sabotage and the depression, the anxiety, and years of being medicated, either with alcohol and drugs or prescription drugs and painkillers. They had never gotten to the heart of it, but we saw in the way that they left that they were completely different people.
and they usually end midday on Sunday. And on Friday night, as you know, everyone comes and they seem very apprehensive. Some people, like you say, their faces feel like, like you said, wrinkled with lines and all upset and like this. And one of the early exercises, scriptures that I always find really is good is the one where they say, that neither do I condemn you. Describe that little exercise, because I think that's the problem. People feel condemned by the church or the world around them, or pro-life people, and that exercise where you're told that you're not being condemned. I think that's the first step where they could go, oh, okay. Describe that for everybody, okay? But
that
briefly.
Exercise is the exercise that you're speaking of is the woman caught in adultery, and we actually read the scripture, and then we go through a meditation where you're the woman that's caught in adultery, and that the punishment for that back in the day when Christ walked the earth was death by stoning. And in the meditation, that's what's going to happen to you. And I find this exercise so interesting because it's the woman who bears the shame. It's the woman who bears the burden of the procedure and the punishment she so deeply internalizes. And until she sees men grieving their own abortions in Rachel's Vineyard, she thinks that they don't care either. But in the meditation, she's about to endure this, condemnation, death by stoning, and she's terrified. And Jesus comes and he bends down, he writes in the dirt, and then he says to the crowd who's all ready to stone her, let the one without sin cast the first, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And everyone walks away. So in the meditation, it's a very powerful moment of confusion and terror because she's about to be stoned. And then she looks at Jesus bent down, probably so he could see her eyes, because eyes filled with shame are usually looking down. They don't make eye contact. And he catches her eye and he says, woman, where are they? Is there anyone here to condemn you? And she says, no one. And he says, I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more. This is a remarkable passage because he's establishing a new law, because the Jewish law at that time demanded this. That's how you handle this sin. And the Lord is showing for the first time publicly this incredible level of mercy, compassion, forgiveness, and releasing her from the consequences of the law.
Right. Well, Theresa, we have a question here from one of our listeners here.
Okay.
And they want to know, what can parishes do in their outreach programs to assist women and men who've gone through Rachel's Vineyard, but continue that healing journey? What can they do is what the question is.
Well, I think I know that this has happened in a lot of places, is educating the parish about post-abortion trauma, giving them opportunities to witness and invite others to healing. Janet, yourself from the Silent No More awareness campaign, that by supporting them in, there's been people after their Rachel's Vineyard retreat, the parish would raise money to send them to the Silent No More rally in Washington and get them a hotel room and pay their way to go, just so that they could really lift them up as voices of experience who deserve to be out there in the public debate. And the beautiful thing is that when they're freed from the shame, and not everybody's called to this, but a lot of women believe that through Silent No More and efforts like that they're able to honor the life of their child. In this retreat we just had last weekend, there was a commitment after commitment to share their child's life with other people, like as a way to remember, especially after years and years. As I said, many of them had never even, nobody knows, even their own children and whatnot. And they just felt like a call after that deep healing. But at the beginning of the retreat, they were saying the most terrifying thing is that they would think that if their daughter ever found out or someone else ever found out. And here at the end, they're like, they really want to share that. that's not a requirement of the retreat, but like encouraging them to go to the next level and share their story, invite other
Right.
people, but just knowing they're behind them, I think is a wonderful thing. And to make a scholarship fund to help other people that they know who they love, because everybody knows somebody, even those that have been on the retreat, that they can bring others to healing.
So, Theresa, we have another question here, and this person is asking, with the pandemic happening, I know for a period of time, obviously retreats were canceled or not scheduled, but things are opening up now. What are the protocols in place with the current coronavirus concerns and all that? I know you worked very hard to work with your retreat centers all over the world, in fact, to deal with this. So give us a little snapshot into what that looks like.
Well, we made protocols for the masks and everything, and all the sanitation, everything that everybody else does. But we would take people's temperatures in the morning and in the evening to make sure no one had a fever. Those that would be vulnerable, we said wait until more immunizations are out. But people really, really wanted to come. They couldn't wait for the sites to open up, and throughout the country, all of them are opening. I know that there's a few places that are offering retreats online or private retreats for like couples or two couples that would be online. And then it's a different thing, but they say it works and it's very powerful, even so not being in person. But as the world is opening up, we're just careful. We also do a different kind of facilitation that is more of a somatic approach, where people are invited to tune into themselves. There's less touching, and but we also have wristbands. If you don't mind being touched, is green. If you want to be cautious, and high fives are okay, but don't get too close, and then red would be, please don't come near me. So it's a way for people to signal team members and others on the retreat. Other people just want to be held. They want hugs, and our team does all of that when they're grieving. And when I say they want hugs, I don't mean give me a hug. I mean, when they hit that point of deep grieving, to have somebody consoling and receiving you can be the place on another human being's shoulder where they really feel that they're being supported and witnessed and having their grief acknowledged. Because there's only so long you can scream in your own car without feeling like you're going insane. But when everyone's there crying together, it so much validates this deep heartache and tragedy that's happened that they were never able to look at, and no one else around them would recognize it. So
Right.
it's such a gift to just witness.
And Theresa, I just want to cut to what happens kind of like near the end, because unfortunately, these women, they lost their child, but there was no funeral, there was no wake, there was no acknowledgement. But in the Rachel's Vineyard retreat, as we know, on Sunday, they have that opportunity. They write, of course, during the course of the retreat, if they like, a letter to their child. And there's a part there where they read the letters. If it's a Catholic retreat, there's a mass. Just describe that. You've seen for decades now that transformation that happens on Sunday. So just briefly, just give us a snapshot of that joy of commemorating and remembering their baby.
Well, first, of course, is the grieving. And we kind of begin that Saturday night after they've looked at the whole story. And Saturday night is when they name their baby. They do a prayer of baptismal intent. Of course, we don't baptize aborted babies, but we entrust them to the mercy of God as we renew our own baptismal vows. And this is just a beautiful, because they light candles and they put them into the living water of Christ, which is a promise of everlasting life. So that's a gift and a promise and a hope that they'll see their child again. We just have a beautiful, it's all in the darkness with the candles and each mother and father coming up, grandparents coming up, and entrusting the children to the mercy of God. They take bereavement dolls, their little dolls that they pick out. They're faceless, but they can cuddle them, they can kiss them, to have something tangible to love, because their arms were never able to hold their babe. They have adoration that night, and they bring the dolls and they write letters that reflect on the meaning of the child's life, which is an interesting assignment, because it's not the child's death, it's the life. and how that life has changed the course of their own. And a lot of people feel that their child has brought them into this union with God and this recognition of God and his peace, his love, his forgiveness. Their child bought them. Even the grieving of that child brings them there. So this is a remarkable thing of our faith. And then on Sunday, of course, they read the letters in a beautiful ceremony. They light candles. They put the bereavement babies in a cradle. And then we have a mass of entrustment that ends with, and then a reception with all the families. A lot of family members can come to this service at the end to be a support and to have a window into the work that they did. And once again, a whole room of people, grieving, crying, but they get through that and they're just filled with grace and release and relief, because all that was stored and stuffed down in so many ways has finally seen the light of day. And with the light of day is the gentle cleansing of the wounds of the soul. We have many living scriptures of the wounds that are bleeding. So it's a way to detox everything. And
Theresa, I really want to thank you for sharing today on the program. And I want to tell our listeners here that we will have Theresa Burke back again in a future time, maybe next month, because there's so many different topics I'm going to have her delve into on a future show. Things like, how has this affected the grandparents, the siblings, and how does that work out? And Theresa also has done other retreats for sexual abuse. Now she's doing things with the military. So there's a lot to talk about. So again, thank you, Dr. Theresa Burke, for joining me on Just Ask Janet. And brothers and sisters, until next time, thank you too for tuning in to Just Ask Janet. God bless.
I will be